Let's recreate some original 1880s baby dresses. Alright, so I don't know why I'm starting with the 1880s. I just felt like this is a good place to start, and also I have more original 1880s baby dresses than I do 1860s or anything else. So, this is the first one, which I technically got for free because I bought an original 1830s one, but the lady had like so many and she didn't really know what she had, so she just grabbed a white baby dress and sent it to me. And I was like, this is not what I ordered at all. But she had already sold, I guess, another one that she mistaken for, anyway, the one I wanted was gone. So she refunded me and told me to keep the rest. So I technically got this one for free, which is nice. It's just not at all what I wanted. But embroidery, little sleeve, and tucks on the bottom with a little bit of edging, basically. Very thin edging. Got that one. It, of course, laces on the back, on about the neckline, and the waistline. The waistline is a drawstring. The neckline, however, is not, which is weird. I have lots of cotton voile, which is semi-sheer, which is what both of these are. And I have lace, and there's like 4 things. The insertion, the edging, and then there's a little extra edging on it as well. So I ordered this as well. So I think that's all of that. So let's go ahead and get drafting. I think we're going to start with this one. And I'm going to begin most likely with making the little insertion, which there is some hand embroidery in here as well. This is probably purchased. This is, that is likely purchased. All of this in between is hand done. And it's a very simple, actually, yeah. It's a very simple with like cord. So basically like a crochet cord, which I have tons of crochet cotton. And it's, honestly, the vast majority of it is just a feather stitch. We're not going to be able to get all the entrejou in here because that's beyond my skill level. Actually, I don't like to. So it's beyond my personal preference. So I think this one's probably going to be the most time consuming because of all that intricate work we're going to be doing. Alright, so I traced out a pattern for the first one. I have a front, a sleeve, and a back. I'm going to go ahead and measure the skirt. Because they're just giant rectangles, it's usually easier just to measure and write down the measurements than it is to actually try to take a pattern from that. So, let's see here. It's easier to take a pattern when you find a seam. Looks like we got side seams and not a back seam. So, this is going to be fun. The actual skirt length is 35 inches. But our cutting, because we have that 35, we also have a little bit of turnover at the top. About half an inch. Yep, exactly half an inch at the top. Then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, hang on. 6 half inches, that's 3 extra inches, and this should be about 3/4 of an inch, 3/4 of an inch, that's 1.5 inches there. So 1.5 inches plus 1.5, 6, 7.5 plus a half inch is 8. So we're at 8 extra inches. And then we have a 2.5 inches for the hem here. So that was 10.5 extra inches. So now we're at 45.5 inches for the length of the skirt. I'm going to assume that since we have a seam on one side, we're going to have a seam on the other. Yes, so she just used 2 breadths of fabric. Now her fabric looks thinner than my fabric. So we have 37-inch width fabric, which, if we multiply that by 2, 74 inches. Now, let's see. She just used the selvage. Awesome. Excellent. Okay. Also, real quick, while I was taking pattern, just wanted to show some things. We went over mending the other day, or last month or so, and we talked about how to do the back and forth weaving thing to mend small holes. And would y'all look at that right there? Exactly what we've taught. Alright, so what we're going to do now is start to cut these pieces. And I think we're going to work on the skirt first so that we don't have to mess with any of this. I'm pretty sure my fabric is 50 something inches wide, which is going to really suck if it is, because that's going to make my life a little bit more difficult. 56 inches. Okay. So here's the question. Do I cut down panels to that 32 inches? Which is fine, but then I wouldn't have the selvage. I would have to do felled seams, which is not a technique she used because she just had the breadths that were that wide. I can't get this fabric in that width. So option A is to use 2 breadths of fabric like she did and have a super full skirt, which would not quite be period. Cut down the panels to the size I need and have to fell seams, which is a period technique, but not usually used because they had a lot more fabric widths than we do today. They had fabric this wide. They also had fabric in different widths. That way you could buy the exact width you needed to eliminate waste in your sewing. So I could do that. I could also do the 56 inches and then do like a little half panel, in which case my seams would not line up with the center back. So I think I'm going to go with option B, which is to cut 32, really 33 with seam allowance. 33 inch wide pieces. And that's going to create a lot of waste for me. But I can use that waste making handkerchiefs for myself. I can cut the baby's bodice from that. I can potentially cut another skirt width. If the other skirt happens to be a little narrower, I can cut that skirt width from what's left over. So we're going to do that. 45 and a half. So basically, we're going to cut 2 widths at the same time. And then put the selvage together on one. And I only had to fell one side. Alright, I have 2 skirt seams sewn together, and so one is felled, like we talked about. The other just has the selvage, like we talked about. So what I'm going to do now is fold it in half so we can get a back seam, because that's where the dress opens. It opens down the back. Fold that in half. And I just measured. In the original it goes to 10 inches, but because there's a ½ inch turnover, I'm going to cut to 10 and a half. And I'm using the modern machine. I could be using Wilma, but Wilma's in timeout right now because I changed her needle and now she doesn't want to sew. And Rhett's not home, so I'm going to wait for him to get home tomorrow, and so he can look at her and see what's going on. Also, I did buy an 1880s machine. I don't think I can sew on her though. So yeah, she's not usable, but down the road maybe, once I get... Mascot is first priority for fixing up, of course. I wasn't even looking for an 1880 machine. I even told Rhett, like, I don't want another sewing machine unless it's pre-1850. I would like an 1840s sewing machine. Or at least pre-1855, but I would really like a pre-1850 sewing machine. And I kind of want it to be a treadle. But I will accept a hand crank if that's all we can find. And so that's what we've been looking for. But I saw that one. It was all rusted. It was sitting outside. And so I asked Lily, like, how much we went for it. She's like, I've just been using it as a doorstop. I'm like, okay, yeah, now I had to buy it. I had to rescue this poor thing. So, $10 and it's mine, and I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet. It was clearly on a table at some point. I don't know if I'm going to find a table for it or what I'm going to do. But, alright, I'm going to stitch that up just on the machine. Alright, so, working on, of course, the tucks. So, it's actually not too bad. I'm just measuring them one at a time because it's a little bit easier. Basically, the edge of each tuck is 1 1/4 inch from the top of the last tuck. I started with the middle one. I believe it was 11 inches from the top. Was it 11 inches from the top? Yeah, 11 inches from the top, and that's the 3/4 inch one, and then I did the top 3, and I'm doing the bottom 3. It's not exactly even, but I was measuring hers, and hers are kind of wonky too, which makes me very happy. And she hemmed it with a deep hem, but also put edging on the bottom. So I'm going to look at how she did that. Also, kind of hilarious. This skirt is as long as I make my skirts. We cut it 45.5 inches. I cut my skirts 45 inches. Technically, it's ½ inch longer than my skirts, and I'm a full-grown human. all 7 tucks done. We are working on the bottom edge. So again, it's like a hem with the edging. This is the 3rd time I've tried this. I haven't sewn any of it, I've just been pinning it on, but I had a hard time figuring out exactly what the original was doing. And I think this is it. I think. So 2 inches from the hem, we're going to go ahead and stitch this on. I did fold down the raw edge just a little bit. It's a very narrow, edging, so I didn't want to do it too much. Alright, that was not exactly what the original shows, but I already sewed it, so I'm going to leave it. What I'm doing now is just kind of spritzing the whole thing with water, making sure those tucks are really going to stay. We're about ready to start on the bodice. What I need to do first is go ahead and turn the top under that 1/2 inch that we saw on the original. And I need to see if I can see how many rows of gathering there are. I'm going to assume 2, there may be 3. Alright, bodice. So I'm working on adding insertion. I was going to copy the original exactly. I did these 2 first, which was the wrong thing to do. I should have done all the center stuff first. So getting the crossways on the original is not going to happen because I'd already done these and I wasn't taking them out. So I just did this instead. So I am going to do the little embroideries in these sections. Since we already planned on doing that anyway, I might as well. We're at the embroidery part. So the original shows a chicken scratch or a feather stitch, coral stitch, whatever you want to call it. So that's what I'm doing, even though I'm not doing it in the same places that the original did. I'm still doing the same stitch. Alright, working on the little bodice. So I have a sleeve that ended up not being nearly as gathered as the original. I don't know what happened because I did measure, but I guess I measured incorrectly. So I have a small sleeve. But yeah, you can see I started on one side to kind of see how it's going to look. The embroidery is a bit shorter than the originals, but I don't have anything besides the original. So we're going with the slightly shorter stuff, which is fine. It still looks pretty good. Also, because my thing was shorter, the sleeve was entirely of the embroidery on the original. I had to just add the embroidery on the bottom. But that seam mostly gets covered by the embroidery on top, so it looks good. I haven't done anything with the bottom yet. That one's going to need a tape in the waist so it can be fitted. Debating on whether I want to actually just sew this now or if I want to do the waistline and then do the handwork all at once. I think that's what we're going to do. Handwork time. So whip stitching. This is the top. And I am putting the ties in at the very corners. The bottom I already have the ties in because it fits, within the waistband basically. But the top isn't fitted. So I'm just sewing it up to the point of being done. Now the bottom one I have to be very careful not to catch the drawstring. That's going to be very important. This part is going to be a little easier not to catch it because I can sew above the seam line. What's going to be hard not to catch the tape is when I sew the skirt on. Gathering up skirt. Oops. I did end up doing 2 gathering stitches for this. Basically it's very similar to gauging. I have one original dress where the skirt is popping out. And it's a great example of how to put these things together. Again, this is going to be the fun part of don't catch the drawstring. One last step I forgot, sewing on the lace, which I am doing different than the original just because I don't have any very thin 1/4 inch lace, and I thought I did, but apparently I don't. So I'm using the bigger stuff. And because it's so much longer, I don't want to raise the neckline, so I'm having to, instead of putting it at the top, putting it at the bottom. But I'm just doing it over top, so if I ever do get some 1/4 inch lace, next time I order lace, I'll try to remember to replace this. Alright, change of plan. So the other original dress, When I bought it, I thought it was 1860s. Looking at it further, I was like, okay, maybe it's late 1870s, early 1880s. I'm looking at it again. I think it's still 1860s. But because I'm so unsure, we're not going to copy that one for this video because this is an 1880s baby dress video. I have an illustration from Castiel's Household Guide from, I believe, 1882. And she has baby dress patterns, well, baby dress illustrations. So we're going to copy one of these illustrations as well. So what I did is I took the pattern, I took off the other baby dress, and I cut little slits almost to the neckline. So I want the neckline to stay very fitted, because I'm looking at the drawing, it looks like the neckline is fitted. And I'm going to do just shoot it out, basically, so I have a lot more, I have a fuller waistline. And this one should be a lot simpler of a project, simply because we're not doing all those tucks, we're not doing any insertions. It's a very simple dress. So we're going to start by sewing the side seams together. No insertions, none of that, you know, more difficult work. Oh, and I have this embroidery. I already cut the sleeves from this. So sleeves are embroidery. This type of stuff, this is going to be for the neckline. And then I have the bigger stuff for the skirt. Alright, let's do a little bit of felling. Alright, we are sewing on the ruffle at the neckline and also the binding. And we're going to do the same thing the other one did, so not putting the drawstring in the top, just in the waistline. Fold it over like we were doing last time, and have a nice little neckline. This is the skirt. I ended up sewing an extra small panel in there just because the 55 just really looked skimpy, so whatever is left over when we cut the last skirt, which is like that last 20 inches, yeah, about 20 inches, I took one of those panels, so now it's 70 inches. I have two lopsided panels, which is fine. I've seen that before too. So now that I have the two panels, I am sewing up a slit, where I cut a slit in the back, and I'm just sewing that up. And I am determined to figure out how to, that original put on that lace on the bottom. So we'll be figuring that out next. But first, keep this from ripping because this is kind of a vulnerable place. We're going to kind of fold it over. And we're going to make a little stitch or seam, really. I believe I may have figured out how to do this. So I pinned up the hem, as in, well, I ironed it up. So 1/2 inch and then the basically 3 inch, 2.5 inches for the hem, and I have the right side of this, and I'm matching up the edge of my edging with that line of where the hem is going to be. And the first seam we're going to do is right on the gathering stitch itself. Alright, so I don't know why she chose to do it this way, because this like takes 3 seams to get this right. So I have that stitched on, I flipped the hem over to the wrong side. So now I have this on the right side, so we got to cover that now. So what it looks like she did is actually got to re-iron this hem over a little bit on that crease. And we're just going to flip the edging over and pin it. Also, it wasn't right side of fabric to right side of edging. It's right side of fabric to wrong side of edging. So yes, my edging is going to be backwards on this gown. But you know what? The fun part is, I just saw one of Marna's originals 1880s baby dresses, and guess what? The edging was put on backwards and the mom left it. So you're calling this a historically accurate mistake. But considering this is a 3-step process, I now see why she left it and didn't take it out and redo it. So now that's pinned in. So on the front, we basically just took a tuck, essentially. But instead of sewing it up here where we normally sew a tuck, we're going to sew it on the bottom. And it's going to look somewhat like that. at this point we ought to know the drill, so putting on the skirt. Also, while I was adding the extra little half panel in the skirt, I was thinking how strange it is, because we already talked about how these skirts are cut about as long as I cut my regular dresses. Well, this fabric is nearly 60 inches wide. Had I been making myself a skirt, I would have used 3 breadths of fabric. This is 1.5. This infant skirt for a newborn has literally half the fabric that I use in my grown-up adult dresses. An infant is not half my size. An infant is significantly smaller than half my size. But no, we're going to use half the amount of fabric. We are not going to add the lace to this one. I don't see anything on the illustration. Granted, it's a very crude illustration, but I don't see anything, so I think we're going to leave that off. So this really will be the last step for the baby dresses. Alright, finished. So original, which I'll set off to the side, and then we have our 2. So what we did first, oops, that would be inside out, there we are, which I actually adore. It actually vaguely reminds me, except for the ruffle up here, of an earlier gown. Like, it could be an 1870s, even an 1860s gown, except I don't think the hand embroidery we did, that type of embroidery was in, basically. And of course this is very 1880s. And it's not as delicate as this one, and I think it's mostly because of this right here, because this is about as delicate as that, and then this is antique, so that should be fine. This is a little bit more opaque, but I think it's mostly just this stuff's a little bit thicker. Very plain skirt on this one. But at least I finally figured out how she did the hem on hers. This one I think I am most proud of, because I did go the extra length and do a little bit extra work on the skirt. And I think skirt decorations always add to it, but I also like this one better in terms of embroidery. I like the one we put more work into, which I guess makes sense. But yeah, those are our little adorable white baby dresses. And I do mostly upper class when I do 1880s. When we get down to doing like 30s and even some 60s, we're going to make the fancy white dresses. We're also going to make another video will be a set of print or just plainer dresses for extreme lower class. But white was recommended for babies because it is easier to launder. But with that, thank you so much for joining me as we made our little 1880s infant dresses. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe to the channel. Click the little bell notification so you're notified anytime I upload a new video. And as always, have a fantastic week, and I'll see you back here in the next one.